everybody, this is TJR.
And this is Robert Kinsler.
And we are doing a follow-up video to the video that we did about a week or so ago. Is it over for rock and roll? And since then, we've gotten a lot of comments, and we appreciate everybody's comments, and we do want to try to respond to some of them. I think there were some good points brought up. Mm-hmm. But also, I think there are things that maybe we didn't bring up the first time that we feel we should bring up now. Mm-hmm. And it's such an in-depth topic, and there's just so many nuances to it. And all the opinions that we got on the video only helped to make me think more about it, in my opinion. Just all the great comments we got from viewers about it. And it really kind of made me think, oh yeah, that's a good point,
Yeah.
So
I was really impressed as well. Just some great points from everybody watching, and I really appreciate everybody's time. I know we both do. Yeah. How much time people spend and how much thought they put into it, and it's obviously a very hot topic just based on the number of comments.
We try to respond to people's comments as much as possible. We may not always get a chance to respond to everybody's comments, but we do try to read every single comment that comes in, and we do appreciate them all. So just once again, thank you. Let me go ahead here. I want to kind of start. One thing that I should have brought up, and I think this is true not just of rock right now, but a lot of music on the radio. A lot of what we call top 40 hits, rock, country, pop, is just the lack of creative chord structures. The lack of really putting a lot of thought into the songwriting. Someone left in the comments a link about a video from Rick Beato, whose channel I do subscribe to. Has every song been written? Mm-hmm. Talking about all. This was actually in reference to all the lawsuits recently, the Ed Sheeran lawsuits, that sort of thing. And basically, kind of what was just said was, when every single song on the radio these days, or most of these songs these hit songs that are being written, are just kind of using the same chords in the scale, which is 1, 4, 5, and 6. Those chords in the scale. And if you're not familiar with what we're saying here, basically in a scale you have 7 notes. Every single note has its chord that fits within that scale. And usually when you write songs, you write within that scale. You can mix in other chords that don't belong. But generally that's kind of your starting point for a lot of pop songs. And they're all using the 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, and the 6 chord. Not necessarily in that order, but they're mixing it up in different ways. But when you do that for a while, it's just going to all start sounding the same. Mm-hmm. And this creates a real sense of genericness. And by comparison, they talked about how, look at some of these chord changes in like Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You by Led Zeppelin. And they actually sit on the guitar and play them. And check out this chord progression by Steely Dan in Josie, the way this opens up here. Nothing sounds like this. He said it's kind of like the idea of spending lots of time figuring out, how should I write this, as opposed to just, 4 chords in order. Mm-hmm. Let's just play 4 chords and then put something over it. And use a formula that's tried and true. Yeah. And I think this not only has a lot to do with rock music, but just kind of the way the public just doesn't get that excited about music. It becomes background music stuff, background noise, in my opinion. So I wanted to bring that up. Was there anything that you thought that we didn't talk about that we should?
Primarily because I have on my mind some of the great comments that we heard, but I agree with everything you just said. I think there is, one of the things that made some of the pioneers, and we're specifically talking about rock today, but because they were pushing the envelope, you think about a band like the Beatles, how quickly they went from I Want to Hold Your Hand to Nowhere Man to, A Day in the Life and so on. Yeah. It was meteoric how fast that they advanced and what they were willing to do, especially their studio recordings. But it wasn't just about, we're going to use tricks in the studio. It was about the songcraft, the same things you were just talking about. And that's so critical, and you're just not seeing that. Sure, a band like Radiohead continues to push the envelope, or Sigur Rós, the great group from Iceland. There's too few bands like that, and there's too many that are doing exactly what you said. They're trying to stick to a formula to be commercially relevant and stay on the radio.
Speaking of comments, someone did mention about how, with all the streaming, I think you should be paying attention to streaming numbers, that sort of thing, but statistically speaking, people still rely on the radio to tell them this is what's good. This is what you should listen to. They still rely on that to get the song repeated in their heads a couple times before they realize that they like that. I like this song, I guess. And that's what they stream. And then they tend to go out and stream what they've already heard that they know.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, statistically speaking, people still rely on radio to tell them what's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting back to the whole challenging yourself. The Beatles were always challenging themselves. They were always trying to not repeat themselves. And I think there is no sense of competition in some respects between music artists like there were, say, during like the 60s and 70s,
right, where
groups were really challenging themselves. They were really in competition. Hey guys, we just heard the Who said they're writing the loudest. It's going to be the loudest, most insane song in the world. That was going to be "Won't Get Fooled Again." Paul McCartney says we need to do one, and they did Helter Skelter.
Yeah.
This whole idea of, hey, we got to top them.
That's exactly right.
Knock them down. We got to like do better than them. We got to blow them away. And there was that, and there's the same attitude prevailed in live shows. Who's going to blow who away in the live show? There was a real sense of competition, and I remember being there at that time when the fans talked that way and the artists talked that way, and it was like sports competitions to a certain extent. And I think people followed the bands like they followed sports teams.
Yeah.
They knew.
That's amazing. It's so very true what you said. I mean, there was, we've talked about it on past episodes about how a new album from one of your favorite artists would come out. You would run out, you'd get the picture disc, the album cover. You'd be looking at that. You'd be listening to music, and there was that whole joy of discovery. Like, what is this band? What is this artist going to do next? How are they going to excite me? Today, it's like if an established artist does anything a little bit far flung or far afield of what fans expect, unless they're maybe like a Radiohead, it's like the fans kind of turn on them or like they diss them. I know, and I know one of the comments, So one of the comments, I think we both jumped out. It was from a Miss Cygnus X1. And it was left about a week before we shot this episode. It says, "What's peculiar to me is that classic rock artists still make new music, but classic rock stations never play or add that newer music to their rotation. Tom Petty, Hart, Robert Plant, Joe Walsh, and others have had really good latter-day releases, but no one cares about them." And I agree with that. In preparing for this follow-up, I mentioned Styx came out with The Mission in 2017. What an amazing album. The band recorded it in secret. It's a great concept album. The Tommy Shaw and the rest of the band sounds phenomenal. They have something to say about technology and about the exploration of space. And this is an album that, as far as I know, the only time I heard it was when a couple of guys from Styx were interviewed on one of these kind of retrospective shows. But as far as those songs being in rotation and just hearing them in the greater Los Angeles area, I never heard it. What a crime.
Yeah, what a crime.
And I know you mentioned some other good albums from established artists that have come out that you've not heard either.
Many. There are a number of artists who have, I think, done some of the best album of their careers ever. Tom Petty, before his passing, I think did some of the best albums of his career. Could not get any of the songs on the radio. John Mellencamp has done a couple of albums that I thought were just extremely notable.
Oh yeah.
Just like I was like, wow.
I mean, the critics have praised him.
The critics have praised these albums, but they're, like I said, once again, they're not getting the radio airplay. And without the radio airplay, you don't create a buzz.
Right.
And I think it's odd that in this day and age, in this world of technology, that radio still, for some reason, has the public within its thrall, I guess I should say. This brings to mind another comment here by one commenter here. I'm going to read this here. Let me see if this is the right one. Yeah, this is from R5D4D2. And now, first of all, he wrote a first comment where he said, "If you can't find great rock today, you are not trying hard enough." And of course, we've talked about this before, that you have to look for it. It's there. It's just not going to be presented to you on a silver platter by radio stations. So you can't rely on them to bring it to you anymore like we could back in the day. But then I responded to him and I said to him, well, that's why we do this show where we review albums. And he responded again, Rock is not dead. There are tons of talented indie rock musicians out there. If if I can buy their music and see them in concert, why would I care if the bands are on the radio? Today, people can pick and choose using streaming and satellite services. I cannot imagine why anyone would listen to plain old FM radio anymore. Why eat what you are fed when you can choose off an infinite menu? And I think he's absolutely right. I haven't listened to terrestrial radio in decades now because it just wasn't doing what it needed to do. It wasn't to me. It wasn't providing the service of really finding the best music. And I worked in radio briefly, very briefly, and I realized when I worked in radio, basically the idea was not to discover new music. Radio stations don't look at the submissions they've been sent and say, well, this is the best stuff we found. They say, what will appeal to the demographic that we're advertising to? And let's not play anything that goes too far off that beaten track. So let's have that sameness. And that encourages record labels to say, well, if we're going to get on the radio, we have to have songs that sound like what they want, or we're not going to get on the radio. And if we can't get on the radio, we're not going to have hits. And if we don't have hits, we're not going to make money. And if we don't make money, we're not going to be able to take care of our families and yada, 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 yada. And but I agree, with what he's saying. Why would you? But people still do. That's just the bottom line. People still do rely on radio to tell them this is what is the best. Yeah, that's not what radio's interest is. Radio's interest is in keeping you from changing the dial when you hear something that sounds a little too unfamiliar. Yeah, a little too different. And you and I both know it used to not be that way. Even top 40 radio was tremendously varied in what it played at one time. Right. A lot of garbage got played, but there was a lot of good stuff too. I can remember being a kid hearing Bohemian Rhapsody on top 40 AM radio. I mean, amazing when you think about it. Yeah, you think about the same kind of radio stations that that play with that we consider top 40 or top 10 radio now would have played a song like Bohemian Rhapsody, and then would have played something in a completely different genre by another artist after that. Right. So very different world. Very different. Yeah. The one thing I will say in defense of radio are I would call them the non-commercial radio stations, public radio, like in the greater Los Angeles station like KCRW or 88.5, who tie in. Matter of fact, me listening to that station because they recently boosted their signal up, so you do get it along the coast from South Orange County to North Los Angeles County and Northridge. And one of the comments from a Jack Tripper 1 said, "War on drugs gives me hope that rock still has a fighting chance." Their album, I believe it came out in 2017, was the #1 album, rated last year. So I went out and purchased that album. Has become one of my favorite albums that has been released recently. And they were also on the bill at Coachella in 2018, and they were them being there almost got me to go out to Coachella this year, which I typically go, but this year there just wasn't enough rock music and Americana music to get me to go out to the hot desert. But I will say that I watched the stream of their concert. That was great, courtesy of YouTube, and they were phenomenal. And I want to thank him because there are some great new rock artists, and you do have to dig or find another way to discover them. But I am thankful that at least public radio, which is non-commercial radio, is exposing and trying to introduce those artists to new audiences. Oh yeah, I agree. And to me, they weren't part. To me, when I talk about radio, I'm talking about most corporate radio, and the thing is, exactly. Most radio in America today, 99% of most of your radio in America today is owned by last time I checked, 3 to 4 major companies, major conglomerates, and that's it. They're all these stations throughout the United States, and we're talking just the United States here. We can't speak for outside of here, but they're all owned by the same 3 or 4 major corporations. And you're right. And when you put on those stations, you're just not going to hear anything that's going to surprise you. It's all, it's just, especially if you're a rock fan, you're just not going to get it there. And even classic rock radio, which said many of the artists they play on classic rock radio were very innovative and surprising when they came out. But now, of course, they're established. They've proven themselves. These are proven hits, and that's what they're going to stay with is the same 10 to 20 proven hit classic rock songs over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah. And like I said, and the people who listen to the stations are content to hear those same songs over and over and over again without any real interruption because they know these songs. They're familiar, and we human beings, we're wired We like the familiar. And I've often said when it comes to music, we're kind of like children who want to hear the same bedtime story over and over again. We want to keep hearing that same bedtime story. We don't want to hear a different one that might totally surprise us and be different. Yeah. And there is that whole fact that statistically it's been proven that it takes about 3 listens before a song really hits you. We oftentimes hear things passively first before we hear them and say, oh, I like that. Maybe we hear it playing in a mall somewhere, or we hear it, you know, when I was a kid growing up, I'd hear it coming from someone's car at school. You know, I might hear it coming off the radio while I'm doing something else. And you would hear it passively first, and then around the 3rd listen or so, you'd go, oh, hey, and you'd hear it actively for the first time. You may not have been aware that you were hearing it passively earlier, but actively you'd hear it and you say, oh, I like that. I like that song. And you thought you liked it on the first listen oftentimes, but you really didn't. And this goes, actually, and I want to bring this up, this goes to back to some comments on the video that I did about Paul McCartney's new singles, where a number of people just said, well, if you have to listen to it more than once, then it can't be very good.
Yeah.
And I think I used to think that too when I was younger, until I began to realize how often songs seeped in passively before I heard it actively for the first time and said, oh, I like this.
Yeah.
There are those exceptions, of course.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, typically you're going to love a song a lot more on the 3rd or 4th listen than on the first listen.
If you're going to love
even a song that's a great song.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So
There's
so
that
true.
Great story about John Paul Jones when he was being interviewed, and they asked him, you know, what was it like the first time people heard "Stairway to Heaven"? You know, because they played it live before it was ever released as on record. They were playing it live, and he said audiences were bored because they'd never heard it before. They wanted to hear. They wanted us to play, you know, "Whole Lot of Love," something they knew. And to me, that typifies that whole idea that you do have to hear a song at least 3 times before you can know if you like it. You may still not like it.
I can only remember a couple of songs. The first time I heard them, they just blew me away. One is I was on my way to see Queen. I was in the back of a friend's van.
Yeah.
You know, he was driving us. Matter of fact, none of us had seatbelts on. I mean, so it's back in the day, right?
Yeah.
And then and he was playing KMET or something. And then in the back, he had the stereo cranked up. I'm sitting in the back of the van. On Comes Like a Hurricane by Neil Young. I was blown away, and the next day I went out and got American Stars and Bars. Yeah. And but that's what radio then could do. It could introduce you, you know, to these great songs that would become a part of your life and you deeply connect with. Yeah. But typically, you know, you need to hear a song a few times, like even More Than a Feeling or something like that. I mean, it's so iconic today. You hear it and you recognize how brilliant it is. But it's because radio took a chance on it and played this new band out of Boston. Yeah. And that became then a part of the classic rock canon.
Numerous times so that it could start to seep in.
Yes.
You know, it could start to, you know, get into your skin there and get into your
Exactly.
Yeah. So I want to go to a comment here that was, I think it was posted just yesterday. Oh, it's 2 days ago. Here we go. And this is from, if I say it right, Lamech El Lugo.
Okay.
He writes, go to YouTube and you'll see that today's pop artists, rap artists, and hip-hop artists are receiving 300 to 4 billion views per video. Then you go look at rock groups from the late 60s to the 1990s, and they're only receiving up to 20 million views. Post Malone, who is a very famous rapper, in case anyone watching doesn't know, is the new rock star of this generation. I would say right this moment, yes, that's true. He is, because he is so famous. And he writes, you guys are being too careful not to blame the decline of rock music on rap music in fear of being called racist. Just admit it, rap music is to blame. So I don't think that either of us are afraid of appearing racist, because we're not.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Number 2, I don't understand how rap is to blame for the decline of rock music. Because I don't know what rap has done except become a worldwide global phenomenon, you know, to become very popular. Now,
right.
How is it any more to blame than country music, which went from being not that popular of a genre to becoming this huge, once again, global phenomenon country music is, the rise of country music over rock music, the rise of rap music over rock music, the rise of pop music over rock music. I don't know how any of these three genres are to blame for it. They just became more popular.
That's right.
Rock could have stayed just as popular too, but once again, I would say it has more to do with the fact that radio, corporate terrestrial radio, the radio that is 99% of the radio in America, and the radio that is owned by roughly 3 to 4 major conglomerates, they chose to get behind this music. And now I'm not saying, and once again, rap was this thing that was underground and grew and grew and grew, and suddenly became too huge, and you couldn't ignore it anymore. Corporate radio did try to ignore it at first.
Yeah.
So in many respects, yeah, rap is the new rock and roll. But it didn't, I wouldn't say it killed it. I think that, like I said, just radio just abandoned it.
Yeah,
and I think so too. But also, I think that a lot of musicians stopped challenging themselves. A lot of them, of course, after the 90s explosion, sadly, a lot of them led destructive lives.
Yeah.
I think that didn't help either. But I don't know how rap is any more to blame than country or pop.
Yeah.
Yeah. If then they're all equally to blame. In my opinion.
A lot of things are just racing through my head. For example, when I started writing for the Orange County Register in the early 90s, even pretty major country artists of that time were playing at the Crazy Horse Saloon, which they'd have 2 seats a night, maybe 150 people. Now you have country artists like Chris Stapleton or Carrie Underwood or whoever you want to say. They're playing these huge arenas. They're playing these huge country festivals like the Stagecoach Festival in Indio. So you're right. The rise of country music has been tremendous, as it has been for rap and for artists like Katy Perry or Lady Gaga. All this. To some, I'd say more the pop artists, and that kind of music has got the full-on endorsement of commercial radio.
Exactly.
Full on.
They're full-on endorsements.
Whereas and I'm thinking about even an artist like Greta Van Fleet, how hard they've had to work just to get a little bit of mainstream exposure, and they have done well. But I'm saying there's so many other good groups that don't even get that chance.
Yeah. And some people have once again commented, well, it's the label's fault, and I don't blame labels that much, because I do see good rock groups signed by labels in spite of how the current market is.
Right. That's
I do
true.
see them signed by labels, but they can't get on the radio. They just can't get that traction. I don't know what label, I'm trying to remember what label Greta Van Fleet is on.
Yeah, I don't recall offhand.
But I do know that the label guy who hired them heard them and just spot on, just heard their, it was literally one of those old school type discoveries where literally he heard them and said, we got to sign these guys now.
Yeah.
We just looked it up. It's Lava Records, which is part of Universal Music.
Right.
And so that's a huge
yeah. Great break for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is a lot of major labels like this, because we only have a few, once again, it's all kind of conglomerates now, but a lot of major labels have these smaller subsidiary labels where they are signing the more artistic artists, where they are signing the more adventurous artists, even though they can't get on the radio. So I can't put the blame on record labels, in my opinion. I have to keep putting the blame on radio, but I also have to put the blame on the public's willingness to let radio say to them, this is what you should listen to.
Yeah.
And the inability by the general public to say, what else is out there? And a lot of people just won't do that. They just want to. You've got the universe infinitely at your fingertips with streaming services now. I have a habit of just simply scanning through the new releases and just, okay, let's hear this. I have no idea who it is.
Yeah. Just give it a try. Yeah, exactly.
Give it a try. Let's just give it. Just give us. See if it in any way connects with me in some way. Even right off the top. Even though I agree with the 3 listen rule, I'll still just okay, let's see. Is there anything even remotely interesting about this?
It just grabs me, and then I just want to check it out. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just you have the universe.
And for me, because I get so much new music being a reviewer for my column, I'm very fortunate, but I'm not I'm not the norm. So I understand it's like, okay, what's it going to take to get other people that don't have to do it like I do?
Yeah.
What is it going to take to get them? But like you said, it would make a big difference if radio, even a couple times an hour, they'd say, hey, this is the newest song from an established artist, or hey, here's this new young rock band. Let's, I really like this. Have the DJ put a little personality and fortitude into it and say, hey, let's play a little bit of this for you all,
And if we go back to the time period we're talking about when radio really did do a lot of that, we're talking like in the 70s, KMET here in Southern California, where the DJs, until the station got corporatized and eventually went down under, that station, the DJs programmed their own shows.
Yeah.
And then even in the late 70s, early 80s, you had K-Rock, which was discovering all the newer music.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like U2 and The Cure.
Uh-huh.
They were being the first ones to play these type of events.
Right.
Where the DJs once again programmed their own music. As the station became more corporatized, little by little, that was taken away to where they were only allowed maybe two songs per show, or one song per show.
Uh-huh.
And maybe it's gone by now. They don't even get to do any of it now.
Wow.
But that was the thing. You had the DJs that was more about their ability to say, hey, this is a good song. Yes, there was the payola that got involved too. And we talked about it on the previous one. We talked about the whole payola thing, how you would use payola to get the ball rolling. But at that point, the radio stations were all kind of individually owned and operated. So if you could get the ball rolling in one station, in one territory, and the song took off because it was good, then you could then other stations would pick up on it and say, hey, this song's really picking up over here. We don't want to appear like we're not with it. We better start playing it too.
Exactly.
And so, I think it definitely, like I said, the golden age of FM radio, when the DJs were picking what they played, definitely led to more discovery, and led to bands like Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin being the staples that they are now. So there's, I think that is more to blame than saying, well, it's rap's fault.
Yeah.
All rap did was become popular. And by the way, we should talk about, you and I, we don't talk about rap very much on our shows. We've occasionally, on the previous channel, I've occasionally brought in something that was hip-hop oriented because it struck my ears. But neither of us feel that well qualified to discuss it.
Right.
Because
I admit that I'm not qualified. I just don't understand it, or haven't had enough exposure to it. And, so rather than, and just like we only occasionally bring in reggae, country. Occasionally bring in modern country, but we typically go with Americana and the genres that we know a little bit better.
We go with rock, pop, anything that feels rock to us, we go with.
Right.
And we've occasionally brought in a modern country artist that we thought was, hey, we really like this person. Yeah. I've occasionally brought in the Roots, a couple other hip hop artists I've occasionally brought in, and I think it's because it just hasn't, and it puzzles me more that it has not connected with me in a serious way, because there is I see a lot of people from our generation especially saying rap is crap. It's garbage. That's why you don't connect with it. Yeah. I can't believe that, because that would mean that it couldn't be this big of a worldwide phenomenon if it was garbage, if it was all garbage, if it was all crap. It just couldn't be. I just refuse to believe that 90%, that a huge portion of the world is that dumb or stupid that they would listen to garbage. And I have heard analysis of rap songs by people from my generation who do get it, who analyze it in extreme detail. And it's like, okay, obviously there's something there that you and I just don't get the majority of the time. Though occasionally I've heard something that's maybe, oh yeah, I like that. That's really good. But that's the way it is. I was talking to a friend who is a huge, huge hip hop fan, and I was telling him this exact same thing. And he said to me, don't feel bad, TJ. There's a lot of, for the most part, I don't get rock. Maybe a couple songs here and there, but mostly I don't get rock. I don't get it. And I don't get country either. So sometimes we're just wired differently. Maybe we need someone on the show with us that can cover hip hop.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
kind
We'll
of
have to
talk
bring in.
about it.
We'll have to one of these days bring in some more guest stars. We
Yeah,
have done it on the old
country.
channel in the past,
Yeah,
but it does take some real coordination to try to get other
yeah,
reviewers or other people that want to go on camera. And
yeah,
we've done it at the NAMM show a few times, and it's been fun.
yeah. So who knows? But
Yeah.
anyway, so Lamech El Lugo, thank you for your comment. But we respectfully disagree. We don't think it's to blame. And any other comments that we wanted to get to that we saw here?
Maybe the last one that I wanted to bring up is um, and it continues to, I think, bubble under the surface like we've been talking about. But Joseph Hassett that said, could part of the problem be that the new rock bands just don't measure up to the old ones? Has any new band come close to improving or even just equaling the Beatles, Stones, Bob Dylan, Led Zeppelin, The Who, Pink Floyd, Bruce Springsteen, U2, etc.? I would say, I think sometimes we need the time. We just need the years to go by to recognize, hey, is that really as good as we thought it was? But I think now we're far enough away. We've come far enough into the future that looking back to the 90s, we can recognize some great bands like Blur, like Oasis, like Radiohead in particular, that do measure up. They're different, but that's what the key thing is here. We don't want a Beatles knockoff. Radiohead is not that. We've had some great, terrific bands emerge. The Pearl Jam, I say, made an excellent case. And they've had the longevity now. They've done some significant recordings and I think some lasting music. So I don't think you can just say, although I think it's important the people that kind of laid the groundwork for what's come after, but I think some of the bands that have come after have been terrific.
And I hear, like I said, new music all the time. Over the years, over the last 10, 15 years, I've been hearing new music that has just grown with me more and more as time has gone on. And I first heard it and I thought, wow, this is really good. And now 5 years later, 10 years later, it's like, wow, this is really good. Because I think the more you live with music, the more it becomes part of your life, the more you begin to appreciate it. Music is, I think, sometimes different from movies. And this goes back to the 3-listen rule, where most of the time you can watch a movie or a TV show and you know if you like it right away or you don't like it. You don't need repeated viewings. It's very rare that that will change with repeated viewings. Very, very rare. But music doesn't work that way. And I think there's a whole discussion there someday as to why.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we've talked that. And the other thing that's interesting, another discussion, and I'm glad the other thing is like someone can be a fan of comedies, they can be a fan of Westerns and of science fiction, of documentaries, and yet in music, we tend to say, oh, I only like old music. Oh, I only like rap music. I only like heavy metal music.
Yeah.
We don't seem to embrace, I mean, you and I are, I don't want to say we're the only ones, but we're very open-minded. Like we can listen to all kinds of music, especially when it's rock or something like that. Other people don't, like, oh, I only like Bruce Springsteen's 70s and 80s material. They don't even want to listen to an album like Wrecking Ball or something. I mean, it's crazy. It's like, wait a minute. Would you say that about other areas? I mean, it's crazy.
We just say about the different genres in film versus different genres in music. And you bring up a good point. I think you bring up a very good point. There are certain prejudices and biases, and I had them when I was younger. Definitely, where there were just things I just said I don't like this, and I have eaten crow on those, on a lot of those, on all of them actually. There have been so many genres where I said, oh, I'm not into that kind of music, and now I like it. I used to say I hated country. I like a lot of old school country now, and there's a lot of people in modern country that are doing basically kind of the more Americana style rock. The
very
rock
much.
that would not be considered heavy.
Like we've both talked about the
blues,
Jayhawks,
rock,
or something
pop,
like that.
But it was somewhere in between. I'm hearing that in a lot of today's modern country music. So, and that goes back to what we talked about, how has rock's identity been stolen to a certain extent by modern country. And there was one commenter who, I'm sorry I don't have your handle here, but someone did say, rock is still relevant, it's just called country now. That's partly true, I would say 50% true, because the heavy rock, modern country's still not going to get away with that at this point. Though some have come close, there have been some hybrid bands, and I don't consider, like Blackberry Smoke, where they get some pretty nasty heavy, they get into the heavy British blues thing, You know, they can get really close to it. There's still the country drawl in the vocals a bit,
Right.
but I would say it's there are some bands that have hit really close, and I call them hybrid bands, and I guess the rest of the world calls them country.
Yeah.
But mostly true. But you're not
Yeah.
going to get away with it yet with metal. We
Yeah.
haven't seen guys with cowboy hats playing metal yet.
Yeah, not yet anyway. Yeah,
and
exactly.
still calling it country.
Yeah, yeah.
But
although I've gone to, like when I've gone to Stagecoach, and of course we're going all over the map today, that like a guitarist will go on there with a solo, and it literally could be, the solo sounds like it could be an Angus Young solo, but then it gets back and they'll make sure there's some fiddles or mandolin in there or something. But it is funny how they've pushed it, but they only push it so far.
Yeah, they push it as far as they can go and still,
because they got to make sure at least they say it's country, or maybe they mention Willie Nelson or Johnny Cash in the lyrics of the song or something like that. But it is funny. But yeah, it's definitely interesting, this whole topic, and it'd be interesting too if we revisit it in a year or two to see if anything's changed. Do a follow up.
I am hearing so much good new music every day, every week. I'm hearing new stuff, and like I said, that's why we do our show, Music Worth Buying,
right.
Review albums. And if you haven't started watching that, please watch it. I know we're shamelessly plugging ourselves here, but if you want to discover new music, we're always trying to find what we think is good new music in all genres that we can discover it in, not just rock, but everything.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
We'd love to see. I think what we need to see is an embracement of not just rock, but more organic sounding music. Where it's played with real instruments. I think you can use the electronics to your advantage in the same way that the Beatles utilized studio tricks into their advantage, studio effects, that type of thing. But I think we have to see an embracement of real instruments, and also music created by musicians versus music created by producers. I hate to say, because unless the producers are musicians themselves or composers.
Yeah.
As opposed to just snipping samples together and putting them together. I mean, I'm not saying you couldn't do great things with that. You can, and I've played with it too at home, and occasionally come up with things. Hey, this is pretty cool. But I've always mixed real instruments with it. Yeah, help lift it above that. And anyways, though, any other closing thoughts? I think we've I know we said it. Want to thank everybody's for interspersing and commenting their what they have to say about it. And I have, ever since we first discussed doing this, it's continued to weigh on my mind, like what would it take to get rock. I mean, the classic rock is going to survive, but we don't want to. What's happened to the blues is really unfortunate. Blues is kind of seen as this, this archival kind of style, and yet there's great blues artists today, but they get no exposure on commercial radio. And they sound like the rock of the 70s.
They do, yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. They do.
Bonamassas,
Joe Bonamassa, Tommy Castro. I mean, there's so. I mean, indigenous. I mean, there's been so many I've covered. Either I've seen them or reviewed their albums that are just fantastic, and they get some exposure at blues festivals and maybe some public radio stations, and that is it.
Yeah.
Or some blues clubs. It's so unfortunate that some of these great artists have, and that's, if we don't change things now, that's what's going to happen to rock and roll.
Yeah. Maybe so. And I don't know. Maybe the blame goes to the decline of blues. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, everybody, thank you for watching. We're looking forward to checking out your comments on this one. And as always, if you like what we do, please click subscribe, click like, and click the bell notification icon so you can know when we release new videos. And anyways, Robert, thanks for following up on this one. And
hey, thank you, TJ. Yeah, appreciate it.
Once you do this again.
Yeah, no, sounds good.
All right. Bye, everybody. Take care.
See you later.